Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. It's a day of steady gains as the Lal Street regains all of Friday's losses. The Nifty and the Sensex gain over 0.5%, led higher by large caps like Reliance, SBI and HDFC Bank. The Nifty crosses 26,000 in intraday trade but ends lower. Major relief for Vodafone Idea. The Supreme Court allows the centre to reconsider the cash-strapped company's AGR dues worth 93,000 crores, observes that the matter is within the policy domain of the centre and in the larger public interest, merits reconsideration. The stock hits a one-year high. The US President Donald Trump finalizes a crucial trade-related pact with Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia and Vietnam in the first leg of his South Asia trip. Also signs an expanded truce between Thailand and Cambodia that he helped broker in July. China presses for stronger economic ties and more open trade with ASEAN nations. Trump says Washington and Beijing are poised to come away with a trade deal ahead of his scheduled meeting with China's Xi Jinping later this week. Adds he could sign a final deal on TikTok as early as Thursday. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says both nations have reached a substantial framework and 100% tariffs have been averted. The Indian government plans to hike FDI limit in PSU banks from the current 20% to 49% as per Reuters, citing sources. This comes on the back of renewed foreign investor interest in the private banking space. RBI issues draft norms for capital market financing by banks with guardrails, caps acquisition financing to 10% of the bank's core Tier 1 capital, says acquirers must be listed, show profits for the past 3 years, adding that the acquisition must be for long-term value creation and not short-term financial gains. The Lal Street gears up for another week of billion-dollar IPOs led by Lenskart and MTR Foods parent Orkla. Lenskart 7,200 crore rupee IPO opens this Friday. The company targets a market cap of 69,500 crores. The management tells CNBC TV 18 that 4,000 stores by 2030 is mission possible. Reliance and Meta incorporate their new AI joint venture, name it Reliance Enterprise Intelligence Limited. Both companies have jointly committed an initial investment of 855 crores. Reliance will own 70% stake in the joint venture. Outgoing Chief Justice B.R. Gavai recommends Justice Surya Kant as his successor. Justice Kant was elevated as the judge of the Apex Court in May 2019. If approved by the Law Ministry, Justice Kant will serve as the Chief Justice till February 2027, a tenure longer than that of his predecessor. Well, let's head straight to the day's market action. It's been a strong start to the week after the Lal Street regained all of Friday's losses. The Nifty and the Sensex gained nearly 1%, led higher by large caps like Reliance, SBI and HDFC Bank. The Nifty crossing 26,000 in intraday trade, but ending mildly lower, 25,966, still higher by about 170 points, 560 higher on the Sensex. The Nifty mid-cap 1% higher, and similar story playing out for the Nifty Bank, which added about 0.5% as well. So strong start for our markets. And gold prices, meanwhile, continue to fall as the broader sentiment in the bullion market turned cautious. This after progress in the US-China trade negotiations dampened demand for safe haven assets. Profit taking and a stronger dollar also weighing on prices. Silver also followed suit after 2 months of gains. Now, the Finance Ministry's monthly economic report highlighted that India's economy has continued to gather strength despite global economic uncertainties and trade disruptions. And this was largely supported by robust domestic demand, strong activity and contained inflation. The report also said that global economic activity remained steady over the past few months despite adverse trade policy disruptions. The report further highlighted that lower GST rate is expected to support a positive demand outlook and stimulate consumption and investment across sectors. But the top story this evening, major relief for Vodafone Idea after the Supreme Court allowed the centre to reconsider the cash-strapped company's AGR dues worth 93,000 crores. Now, the Apex Court observed that the matter is within the policy domain of the centre, adding that the larger public interest merits reconsideration. Remember, Vodafone Idea's AGR dues currently stand at over 93,000 crores. The stock hit a one-year high after the order was pronounced. Ashmit joins us now with more on the order from the Supreme Court, but more importantly, the options before the government. Big relief coming in there for Vodafone Idea, Ashmit.
Well, it indeed does. Vodafone Idea knocking on the doors of the Apex Court on multiple occasions, finally getting a positive response. Bear in mind that this time the government was batting in their support. The government was saying that, look, there is a complete change in facts and circumstances. The government said that we now hold 49%, and by virtue of the government stake, That necessarily means there's public interest involved as well. Went on to say that over 20 crore customers will stand to be impacted if Vodafone Idea goes south, and also said that this will also affect the competition in the larger telecom sector. Now, all of these aspects weighing on the minds of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court saying that, look, this is a policy matter. We do not want to intervene. And on the contrary, the Supreme Court saying we want to give the centre a free hand. Given that it is a policy matter, the centre should be the one to decide the future course of action, to any relief that needs to be worked out, any structure that needs to be given as far as the AGR issue is concerned, legacy issue going back a couple of decades here. The centre finally now being given a free hand in terms of deciding in what shape and form they want to grant relief as far as Vodafone Idea is concerned. One aspect, one caveat to bear in mind, the Supreme Court also pointing out that they're granting this relief, they're granting this blessing on account of the peculiar facts and circumstances of this particular case, which of course then raises the question that will it also be applicable for any relief that is to be granted to Bharti Airtel as well. Clearly the ball is in the DOT's court. They will now have to take a call on what shape and form the future course of action will take. The Supreme Court saying we will have none of it. The DOT, the Supreme Court opening up, freeing up DOT's options.
This is in the policy domain of the union. And there is no reason as to why the union should be prevented from considering the matter. So, to my mind, not necessarily it would apply only to Vodafone, but it could apply to the other telecom operators as well. Because if it is a policy decision, it should apply to everyone.
If the government takes a policy, then they'll have to apply it uniformly to other telecom companies as well. They can't pick and choose. And therefore, I think there's a very good order from the industry point of view. All telecom companies will stand to gain. And Supreme Court will not interfere in this matter, but has really given a free hand to the central government. The ball is now in the central government's court.
Well, relief there for Vodafone Idea. Of course, the contours of the relief yet to be worked out. The big global story this evening. President Trump has said that Washington and Beijing are poised to come away with the trade deal ahead of his scheduled meeting with China's Xi Jinping, which takes place later this week. Now, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has said that both nations have reached a substantial framework and 100% tariffs have been averted for now. Take a look.
Very interesting couple of days. We have Japan, and then we have South Korea, but we have China coming, and it's going to be very interesting. I have a lot of respect for President Xi, and we are going to, I think we're going to come away with a deal, but I really feel good. Our country's doing so well economically. It's doing so incredibly well. The Democrats should let it open. I guess they don't do that because it's doing so well. It's too bad, but on the, the macro scale, it's not having that kind of event. We just want people to get paid. We think it's very unfair.
So this was the fifth meeting that I've had with my Chinese counterpart, the Vice Premier, Hu Lifeng, and we covered a wide range of issues, and I think we've reached a substantial framework for the two leaders who will meet in Korea next Thursday. So, on the table, the president had given me maximum leverage when he threatened 100% tariffs if the Chinese imposed their rare earth global export controls. So I think we have averted that so that the tariffs will be averted. We also agreed on substantial agriculture purchases for U.S. farmers. We agreed that the Chinese would begin to help us with the precursor chemicals for this terrible fentanyl epidemic that's ravaging our country. So I would say that it was a very good meeting overall.
Well, that's the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent there. The U.S. has finalized deals related to trade and critical minerals with 4 South Asian countries that took place over the weekend. Now, the agreements were signed during President Trump's visits to Kuala Lumpur for a summit of the ASEAN nations. The Trump administration has said that Malaysia and Cambodia have signed trade deals, adding that the countries have agreed to cut tariffs on a variety of U.S. exports. The deals also facilitate U.S. access to critical minerals. The countries will in turn receive certain exemptions from Trump's so-called reciprocal tariffs. tariffs. The White House also said that Thailand and Vietnam have agreed to frameworks for trade deals. Both countries agreed to cut tariffs on nearly all U.S. goods and reduce regulations on American companies. In return, the U.S. has agreed to identify goods it would exempt from its tariffs on the countries. The president also presided over the signing of a ceasefire deal between Thailand and Cambodia. CNBC's JP Ong explains the importance of these agreements.
This was probably one of the more important or more substantial ASEAN summits we've had in years, actually, also because it seems that that framework or that groundwork that was laid to try and pave the way for a potential meeting between Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping was laid out here in Kuala Lumpur on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. And also because they did ink a number of trade deals, as you mentioned, with 4 ASEAN countries, the likes of Cambodia and Vietnam, saw their trade deals finalized. Thailand, seeing a framework that has been laid out that will mean that they were this close or very close to actually finalizing that trade deal that will see them getting a tariff of about 19%. Arguably the most important or the most interesting one was the one that the U.S. signed with Malaysia, not just because Malaysia is the host of the ASEAN, holds the chairmanship of ASEAN this year, but also because there were key elements, there are key components in that particular agreement that involved rare earths, establishing a pipeline of rare earths between Malaysia and the United States. According to Malaysia, they did some initial studies and said that there are indicative potential resources or rare earth resources that could be as much as 16 million metric tons if this is indeed verified, which means there's a huge opportunity for Malaysia to actually court some of these investments and also take a bigger role in the rare earth industry. And so far, they have actually cemented at least an agreement to potentially supply these to the United States. But keep in mind, Malaysia is also talking with the Chinese to possibly bring in rare earth investments into Malaysia. So again, this puts them in a very interesting position because there's a lot of opportunity for them in the rare earth space, but also a lot of steps and a lot of miles they have to travel, and also a lot of relations that will have to maintain between the United States and China, who are competing in this very, very critical sector.
Well, the JP Ong there reporting from Kuala Lumpur. President Trump has once again claimed that India is going to stop buying oil from Russia. Speaking to reporters yesterday, Trump reiterated that India will completely cut back its Russian oil purchases, while China will cut back very substantially.
Will you discuss purchases of Russian oil with Xi Jinping? Are you worried about the Chinese buying Russian oil?
I may be discussing it, but you know, China's, I don't know, you probably saw it today, China's cutting back very substantially on the purchase of Russia oil, and India's cutting back completely, and we've done sanctions. Thank you very much, everybody.
President Trump reiterating his claim on Russian oil. President Trump also met Brazil's President Lula da Silva on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Malaysia. Lula termed the talks as constructive. This was the first time the two leaders met face-to-face since the U.S. decided to impose 50% tariffs on the country. Remember, like India, Brazil has also been hit with 50% tariffs. President Trump said that both nations should be able to make some pretty good deals. He added, and I quote, "We've been speaking and I think we will end up having a very good relationship. We have always had a good relationship. I think it will continue," end of quote. Meanwhile, Brazil's president said he had a great meeting with President Trump. They've agreed that their teams will meet immediately to advance solutions to the tariffs and sanctions against Brazil. Lula also said that President Trump guaranteed that the two leaders will make a deal. Prime Minister Modi said that the 21st century belongs to India and the ASEAN nations. Addressing the summit virtually, the Prime Minister emphasised India's vision for a shared, inclusive and sustainable future in its partnership with Southeast Asia. He also reaffirmed India's steadfast support for its ASEAN partners and announced 2026 as the ASEAN-India Year of Maritime Cooperation.
Friends, 21वीं सदी हमारी सदी है, भारत और आसियान की सदी है। मुझे विश्वास है कि आसियान कम्युनिटी विजन 2045 और विकसित भारत 2047 का लक्ष्य पूरी मानवता के लिए एक उज्जवल भविष्य का निर्माण करेगा।
That's the Prime Minister addressing the ASEAN summit. India and China resumed direct commercial flights after 5 years. Indigo's first flight took off from Kolkata to Guangzhou, carrying 180 passengers. The External Affairs Ministry has called this move a gradual normalization of bilateral exchanges. Chinese officials said that this was a very important day for India and China's relationship. Remember, the government had suspended flights to China in 2020 after the Galwan clashes, and now the resumption of flights taking place. President Trump arrived in Japan's capital of Tokyo today. This is the second stop on his three-country Asia tour. He met with Japan's emperor at the Imperial Palace amidst heightened security due to protests in the city. Speaking to reporters when he landed, Trump said he was excited to meet Japan's new Prime Minister, Sane Takaichi, tomorrow. The trip comes amidst a $550 billion investment pledge from Japan, which is in exchange for easing U.S. import tariffs. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit. Both leaders discussed bilateral ties along with key regional and global issues. The meeting comes amidst the ongoing trade talks between both sides. We will head to a break, but up next, Reliance and Meta incorporate their new AI joint venture. Name it Reliance Enterprise Intelligence. That and more when we get back. The Reserve Bank of India has issued draft directions opening the window for banks to finance acquisitions by Indian companies in India and abroad. However, these directives come with certain guardrails. The new capital market exposure framework rules will be effective from the 1st of April. Ritu's here to take us through the details. Ritu, take us through what the implications will be of these new rules.
The Reserve Bank of India has finally put out draft rules on capital markets and acquisition financing for banks, setting clear limits and safeguards. So a bank's total exposure to capital markets, both direct and indirect, is going to be capped at 40% of the Tier 1 capital. Within that, the direct exposure, which includes investments and acquisition finance, cannot exceed 20%. And specifically, acquisition finance is going to be capped at 10% of the Tier 1 capital. Now, on M&A financing, for the first time, RBI is allowing banks to lend to Indian companies that want to buy stakes in other companies in India or abroad. But RBI says these deals must be strategic and aimed at long-term growth and not short-term profits. To qualify, the acquiring company also has to be listed, have a positive net worth, and must have been profitable for the last 3 years. Also, banks can only fund up to 70% of the deal value, while the remaining 30% has to come from the company's own equity. After the acquisition, RBI says the debt-to-equity ratio cannot exceed 3:1, and the loan must be fully backed by shares of the target company as security. Next, let's also talk about lending to capital market intermediaries. Banks can lend to them only if the loan is fully secured and the collateral actually belongs to the borrower, and there is a restriction where banks can't finance them for proprietary trading or investments of their own. Now, when it comes to IPO, FPO and ESOP financing, banks can lend up to 25 lakh rupees per person, but covering only 75% of the subscription value. Finally, loans against securities for individuals. Banks can lend up to rupees 1 crore per person. Within that, 25 lakh rupees can be used for buying shares in the secondary market. Now, while bankers we've been speaking to have welcomed the move overall, called it a good start, not all their requests have been addressed. So they will seek clarifications, for instance, whether banks can finance foreign companies looking to buy in India, not just Indian companies making acquisitions. Also, the clause on acquiring company being a listed entity, the profitability and the 3:1 debt to equity cap after acquisition has also raised some concerns among bankers, especially for deals that involved distressed assets. Public comments on this draft are invited by the 21st of November, and the final rules are expected to kick in from 1st of April next year.
Ritu, many thanks. Kotak Mahindra Bank's second quarter earnings in line with street estimates. Net profit dipped nearly 3%, while net interest income rose over 4%. On an annual basis, the bank's asset quality improved in the quarter on a sequential basis. And staying with earnings, shares of SBI Life surging after the insurer posted a strong Q2 that surpassed expectations. Annual premium equivalent rose 10%, while the value of new business grew 14%. Premiums from new business also up 28%. SBI Life's management told CNBC TV18 that growth in the second half of the fiscal will be close to 18%. The government has announced that 6 companies have received approvals under the government's electronic component manufacturing scheme. The investment that has been approved for the companies stand at 5,532 crore rupees. Union Minister Ashwini Vaishnav has said that with these approvals, India will save 20,000 crore rupees on its import bill. Eyewear retailer Lenskart is set to launch its IPO on October 31st. The firm is looking to raise 7,278 crore rupees through a combination of fresh equity and an offer for sale. The 3-day subscription window will close on the 4th of November. The price band has been set between 382 to 402 rupees apiece. The IPO comprises fresh issue of 2150 crores and an OFS of 5,128 crore rupees. Lenskart will deploy the capital towards setting up new company-owned and company-operated stores, lease, rent and license agreements, investing in technology and brand marketing.
International continues to be a good focus for the company.
4,000 stores by 2030?
Again, I would say...
Possible?
Definitely. I mean, India has 80,000 eyewear stores, approximately, conservatively. And that Abhishek said, we have 60 stores for 1 million people. We have 20 times more jewelry stores in India. So one would say, can you add at least another 80,000 optical stores as a country? Yes. Right? Out of that 80,000, let's see how many Lenskart adds.
Well, that's Lenskart getting ready for the Lal Street. And the Lal Street is gearing up for another week of billion-dollar issues. Apart from Lenskart, together 3 companies which opened for subscription this week plan to raise nearly 9,500 crores. MTR's parent company, Orkla India, will raise 1,600 crore rupees via an offer for sale. The company is likely to have a market cap of 10,000 crore rupees. Helmet manufacturer Studs Accessories' 455 crore rupee issue will also be open for subscription on Thursday. The company is likely to have a market cap of 2,000 crore rupees, so plenty buzzing in IPO corner. Financial services company PL Capital has appointed Zareen Daruwala as its new Group Chief Executive Officer from the 13th of October. PL Capital is a member of the Prabhudas Leeladhar Group. Daruwala is a veteran banker who previously served as the CEO for India and South Asia at Standard Chartered Bank. She retired recently. Swiss drug maker Novartis has agreed to acquire US biotech company Avidity Biosciences for around $12 billion. Novartis will pay Avidity shareholders $72 per share in cash. This as a premium of 46% of the company's Friday closing price. In a statement, the Novartis said that the deal is expected to close in the first half of 2026. Reliance and Meta have incorporated their new AI joint venture named Reliance Enterprises Intelligence Limited. Shares of Reliance Industries rose over 2% in trade. The new company will develop, market and distribute artificial intelligence services in India. Rima is here to take us through the contours of the deal. Rima.
Indeed. So Reliance Industries has launched Reliance Enterprise Intelligence Limited, REIL, which is a joint venture with Meta. Reliance will hold a 70% stake. Meta will have a 30% stake. And the initial upfront committed capex is about $97 million. This ties in with what Mukesh Ambani had to say at the AGM, where he spoke about AI everywhere, AI for everyone. So once again, it goes back to the push that Mukesh Ambani had highlighted about, the broader AI push. But, according to Morgan Stanley, that the $97 million is only the upfront capex. Eventually, the company will be making further investments. They estimate it to be between $12 to $15 billion to build their 1 gigawatt AI data center infrastructure. And the question is, because global tech majors who are in the AI play are commanding such high valuations, once this REIL scales up, what could be the valuations it will command? And will that have a rub-off on the listed entity, Reliance Industry? We'll have to see how that plays out. Back to you.
All right, Rima, many thanks. Outgoing Chief Justice B.R. Gavai has recommended Justice Surya Kant as his successor. Justice Kant was elevated as the judge of the Apex Court in May of 2019. If approved by the Law Ministry, Justice Kant will serve as the CJI till February 2027, a tenure longer than that of his predecessor. In international news, the United Nations has claimed that Israel is continuing to deny the entry of aid into Gaza. Hamas is working with the Red Cross and Egyptian authorities to find 13 remaining bodies of Israeli captives in Gaza. The Israeli Prime Minister has said Israel will determine which foreign forces enter Gaza as part of a planned international force to secure the ceasefire there. Ukraine has launched a major drone attack on Moscow overnight, forcing Russia to close 2 of the city's 4 airports. Russian forces shot down 2 AT-1 drones but did not disclose the extent of the damage. Kyiv has said that the attacks aimed at destroying infrastructure, which is key to conducting Russia's war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russia also hit Ukraine's capital of Kyiv with drone strikes, killing 3 people. And the war continues. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC TV 18. We've got plenty more lined up for you. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment.